In its prime, that city would have dominated the landscape. The steep tiers of the arena were heaving with the screaming followers of the blood god. Their number was beyond counting, yet rendered into insignificance by the sheer size of the horde stretched out across the wasteland beyond the arena's boundaries. This was the combined war host that had sworn allegiance either to Mavan's master, Argus Brond, or to his rival, Taragara, and its total number was the prize that the victor of the coming challenge would claim. At the center of the arena, almost maddeningly small in comparison to the rest of the structure, yet still more than 100 meters across, was an open patch of sand. A lone figure stood in the middle, receiving the adulation of the crowd, while a score of red-armored Chaos Space Marines, the only ones of their kind in view, were arrayed in an arc around him. Mavan recognized his master, Argus Brond.
Thank the true gods.
As he and Kharn had marched through the passages of the Hypogean, Mavan's greatest fear had been that the duel had already begun. Had it been so, then it could not have been interrupted. Globs of liquid fire rained down from the heavens, striking the red sand of the arena with small hisses of steam and foul vapor. Yet Brond stood motionless, arms folded across his chest. Even from this distance, Mavan could read the mood of his master. He was impatient and angry. He would be hating the pomp and grandiosity of this whole enterprise. The former World Eater's captain had hoped to meet Taragara in the field, but Mavan knew that it would never have been allowed to happen. The enemy host had outnumbered that of his master even before the Betrayer had refused to take part and the defections had begun. With everyone to lose and nothing to gain, Taragara would never have met Brond in a fair fight. Mavan's suspicions had been affirmed. Taragara had watched the battle unfold from the safety of his warship, hanging in low orbit above the demon world. Only now, when he believed that his victory was assured, would he journey to the surface himself. Hulking cyber-Ogryn guards, bearing halberds the height of 3 grown men, moved aside to let Kharn and Mavan pass, and they stepped out onto the arena floor. The seneschal saw his master looking their way, sharing a joke with one of his legionaries, a sure sign that he was pleased and contemplating this new development. Brond's features were broad and square, strong but not brutish. His rad-scarred face was smeared with blood and blackened by fire, and his gore-spattered armor bore several new gouges and blast marks. Mavan reminded himself to contact the armorer peon once this matter was concluded. Then he caught himself wondering if there would be any need. Over his red armor, Mavan's master wore a cape of burnished chainmail and a pair of power blades sheathed at his waist. The axe he had borne through all the dark years since the siege of Terra was strapped across his back. As they approached, Brond flashed a glance at Mavan, one eyebrow fractionally raised. The seneschal bowed his head and shuffled to his master's side. Kharn stopped in front of the warlord. He did not bow or incline his head in greeting, but merely stared into Brond's eyes without blinking. He was not quite as tall as the warlord, and slighter of stature, yet the strength and confidence that he radiated made them appear equal. His expression was unreadable. Brond matched his stare, and Mavan licked his lips, unsure how this confrontation would play out. He was pleased when Kharn broke the silence, speaking in his strangely subdued tones.
Is Taragara on his way?
Kharn did not offer any pretense of explanation for his absence during the earlier battle. Mavan could tell that his master was furious, yet he knew him well enough to know that he would not allow his anger to jeopardize this opportunity.
He is.
Then I wish to fight in your stead, if you will allow it.
Brond forced a smile.
It would be an honor, my brother.
I do not fight for your honor. There are skulls I have pledged to Khorne that I would not have others claim.
Mavan could tell that his master was struggling to control his anger. Kharn seemed not to notice.
And I am not your brother. I have no brothers.
A moment of awkward silence passed between them, though the din of the crowd continued.
Well, you have my gratitude, anyway.
Brond inclined his head towards Mavin.
As do you, Seneschal, despite your disobedience.
Mavin bowed. As he lifted his head again, he caught a glimpse of movement in the heavens. A dropped ship was descending towards the arena floor. He pointed into the hellish sky.
Lost him?
Finally, Taragara comes.
The assault ramp of the heavily ornamented Stormbird crashed to the sand, and a broad-shouldered warrior emerged. The accompanying roar of the gathered warbands drowned out the engines of the dropship. Taragara was a hulking behemoth of a warrior, a brutal, blood-soaked killer. Before Scalathrax, he had been a leading figure within Angron's Devourer bodyguard, and he wore the Terminator warplate of the Shattered Legion's elite. Spikes, adorned with the skulls and helms of notable foes, fanned out above his massive shoulders. Flayed and tanned human flesh was stretched like mottled parchment across his cuirass. The grotesquely distorted face at its center was that of an Imperial Fists captain, a foe Taragara had butchered upon the walls of the Imperial Palace. Along with a small band of World Eater's berserkers, he was accompanied by an entourage of senior chieftains. These were the most favored and powerful of those who had sworn their blood oaths to him. The size of the vast armies they had brought outnumbered the World Eaters by a factor of many thousands to one, and the majority of those filling the ancient arena and the surrounding plains were theirs to command. There were 7 of them in all, and they were a motley and disparate group, perfectly encapsulating the varied nature of the host that mustered behind the banner of the World Eaters. A robed and hooded outcast of the cult Mechanicum, eye clusters glowing red and mechadendrites poised, stood alongside a barbarous Xenos humanoid with a distinctly avian aspect to its features and a necklace of human fingers around its neck. A cherubic blonde child with sinister jet-black eyes, who levitated several feet off the ground, cast his demonic gaze over the scene. A grim-faced traitor general of the Imperial Guard skulked behind a completely skinless woman who wore a mask of sewn human flesh and carried a demon blade wreathed in blue flames. Beside them lurked a fat-grown gladiator king with a mane of dreadlocks and cyber-implant nodes studding his neck and shoulders. Last of all, standing slightly apart from the others, was an anonymous Chaos Space Marine, bedecked in blue-green armor and bearing the contorting serpentine heraldry of the Alpha Legion. Some were motivated by promises of worlds and systems yet to be conquered, others by vengeance against an Imperium that they felt had failed and betrayed them. Some were driven by little more than the prospect of slaughter, others by the terms of demonic pacts and soul oaths sworn in blood. All had come together to be part of a new assault against the Imperium of Man, and they would swear ultimate allegiance to whomsoever claimed victory that day. But within this parade of freaks, one inspired fear like no other, the one known simply as the Flesh Terror. In his massive spike-knuckled gauntlet, Taragara held a heavy chain of dark iron, the looping length of which was fixed to the bronze collar of his named champion. The beast was more animal than man, and it strained against the chain that bound it, spitting and snarling. It was another traitor Astartes warrior, yet it was a debased creature, with red-rimmed eyes and drawn flesh. Its flaxen hair was long and unkempt, and it drew its pallid lips back into a snarl of blood-tinged fangs, the elongated canines curiously pronounced. It wore heavily battle-scarred black power armor that was caked in blood and gore. Its left pauldron was a mangled ruin where a chapter symbol had been crudely hacked off. Nevertheless, Maven knew that it was a gene descendant of the dead Primarch Sanguinius. The sons of the Blood Angel had once looked down upon the World Eaters, seeing them as little more than rabid, savage beasts. The irony of that misplaced scorn made Maven smile now. The warlord and his bizarre entourage came to a halt. Brond acknowledged his rival with a nod.
Taragara.
Taragara's expression was thunderous.
Why is the betrayer here? This is treachery.
Treachery, brother?
It was meant to be you, Argus Brond. You cannot name another to fight after the challenge has been accepted.
The flesh-tearer spoke, his voice refined and noble, and completely at odds with his appearance.
I care not which one of them I fight.
Silence, dog!
Maven stepped forwards, surprised by his own boldness.
It is my master's right to name a champion in his stead, just as you have, Lord Taragara. He has named Kharn.
Taragara glanced briefly at Maven, disdain written on his face for all to see.
You let your conniving worm speak for you now, Brond. You are not fit to lead.
Brond gestured towards the snarling flesh-tearer.
And you sully the honor of the Legion by allowing a creature such as this to fight your battles. It is a disgrace.
The Legion is dead. The betrayer there killed it.
Silence fell across the group. Maven's heart skipped a beat. He risked a sidelong glance at Kharn.
You would have died that day, Devourer, had you not fled like a coward. Draw a weapon, and we can address that injustice.
Taragara's face flushed, but he did not respond. He tugged on the iron chain.
The Blood God does not care of the flesh-tearer's heritage, and nor do I. He kills in the name of Khorne. Nothing else matters.
So let us stand back, my brother, and let our champions decide his will.
No! I did not agree to this blood duel knowing that the betrayer would fight on your behalf.
Maven cut in, his voice icy.
It matters not, Lord Taragara. A challenge has been issued. You accepted.
Taragara pointed at Maven with one heavy power gauntlet.
Be silent, worm! I do not wish to hear another word from you, or I shall cut out your venomous tongue!
You will not. My seneschal speaks truthfully.
Taragara gritted his teeth and gestured around the arena.
Your war host is gone, Brond. You are beaten. You are in no position to challenge me. Every one of these warriors is mine. I have no need to go through with this foolishness. At my command, you die!
You would break your word. The Bloodfather watches, as do those you would lead to war in his name. You think they will follow you if you shrink from this challenge now?
Taragara's fists clenched. He knew that he was caught, Maven saw. His desire to see Brond cut down by his champion beast had overridden his caution. Indeed, had Maven been advising him, he would have counseled Taragara to ignore the challenge and finish his rival in battle rather than risk the duel. Thankfully, the brutish warlord had received poor counsel, or had chosen to ignore it altogether.
You should have taken the knee when I offered you clemency, Argus Brond. I might have given you a position of honor. There is nothing for you now.
Brond merely smiled in response. Kharn stepped forwards, dropping his sack of skulls to the ground.
Enough. The Blood God grows impatient, as do I.
He lifted his broad-crested helm from where it hung at his belt and slid it over his head. Pneumatic seals hissed as it locked into place, and its emerald green lenses began to glow with an inner fire. With the helmet in place, his whole demeanor was altered. His muscles tensed, and his breathing hastened. When he spoke, his voice was an angry, bestial growl through the vox emitters.
It is time.
Fine. Once the flesh-tearer is done with your betrayer, I'll set him on you, Brond.
You know as well as I that it will not come to that.
Maven did not share his master's confidence. Oh, he knew of the betrayer's reputation, but he had seen the flesh-tearer in battle earlier in the day. He was a horror of blade and claw, a fanged whirlwind of carnage with glittering, savage eyes. The outcome was far from certain. At a gesture from Taragara, the flesh-tearer's weapon was brought forwards. It was a massive thing, a chain glaive over 2 meters in length. Its hooked teeth were still gummed with gore from the day's battle.
Dog, take up your weapon! Go! Kill!
As you will it.
Those gathered on the sands of the arena formed a circle, and the roar of the crowd rose. The flesh-tearer took the proffered weapon and stepped into the circle. He began pacing back and forth, dragging the tip of the chain glaive across the ground. His unblinking, bloodshot gaze never left Kharn. Without ceremony, Kharn stepped into the fighting circle. The flesh-tearer dropped into a low stance, lips drawing back in another hiss, and his chain glaive roared into life. Kharn's chain axe responded in kind. It was a deeper, throatier growl. It spoke of the mastery of its creator's hand when he had forged it, for this legendary weapon had been crafted by the Primarch Angron himself.
The rage crashes over me like an avalanche. I welcome it. The rumble that rises from my chest joins the din of enraged chain blades. I attack. I know nothing else. The enemy is strong and fast, but so am I. Our blades meet. I will rip you apart, fiend. Gorechild fights against his glaive, tooth to tooth, just as I fight he who wields it. Gorechild roars, I roar as well. Our weapons kick us apart, but we come at each other again, his frenzy matching mine. He is a vicious and brutal creature. I feel the touch of Khorne upon him. Gorechild tastes his blood, teeth tearing through muscle. It is not a mortal injury. He catches me in return, cutting into the meat of my arm. I cast off my helm. I am a flesh-tearer too. I will tear your flesh, pretender. We trade wounds. Blood spatters upon the red sand like rain. Neither of us has any thought of defense. It will not be a long contest. Each strike brutalizes, ripping and shredding. The rain becomes a deluge. We are closely matched, you and I. I willingly take yet another blow to land my own. Mine is the more telling. His chain glaive pierces my armor and grinds at my fused ribs. In return, I take one of his arms. He is upon me before the limb hits the sand. No backward steps here. Fangs at my throat. I hurl him away, and he takes with him a chunk of flesh. He has my taste now, but it matters not. His weapon needs 2 hands to wield it effectively. A final frenzied clash, and the killing blow is struck. Gorechild bites deep, and his face disappears under the ancient teeth, churned unrecognizably. He falls. Not done yet. The rage has not been sated. I whirl in amongst those who were once my brothers, cutting and hacking. The blood flows freely now. This is the very essence of existence. This is everything. I am the Eightfold Path. Taragara dies beneath my axe. Brond too. I cut his seneschal down as well, leaving him to bleed out on the sand, clutching his innards. I would have spared him had the fool not placed his hands upon Gorechild, trying to save his beloved master. The others back away. That merely fuels my fury. Everything is red. I will end them all.
Kharn stood unspeaking. He appeared to be sizing up the flesh terror in return. Taragara raised his voice over the din.
If the betrayer is to fight, then let it be an even contest. Have him put aside the Gorechild.
Mavan scoffed. It was a desperate ploy. But before Mavan could give voice to his derision, Kharn replied.
Agreed. Give me a weapon you deem a suitable replacement.
Taragara gestured to one of his world-eaters, a scarred veteran with a double-headed power axe across his back.
Dragon! Give the betrayer your blade.
The named berserker made to reach for his axe, but the warlord halted him, a savage smile on his lips.
Your sword, Dragon. Give him your sword.
The world-eater, Dragon, unhooked the short blade strapped at his waist and tossed it into the circle. Kharn retrieved it and drew it from the simple leather scabbard. It was forged from unadorned dark steel with a wide blade and a plain hilt. Taragara's booming laughter was taken up by several of his retinue.
The fool thinks he has already won.
Brond stepped forwards.
This is an insult.
He made to unhook his own axe, but to Mavan's surprise, Kharn shook his head.
No.
He spun the short sword in his hand, testing the weight of the blade.
This will suffice.
Mavan threw an alarmed look towards his master. The warlord shrugged. Kharn moved to the edge of the circle and laid Gorechild on the hot sands at Mavan's feet.
Touch it, and you die.
The flesh-tearer still watched him closely, eyes narrowed to points, taking in every nuance of his movement and stride as he stalked back to the center of the fighting circle. Kharn drew up on the sand, flexing his great muscular arms and neck. He beckoned to the beast.
Come. It's time to draw blood.
Blood!
With a scream of bestial rage, the flesh-tearer lunged forwards. The beast was fast, supernaturally fast, and barely seemed to touch the ground as it charged. The mighty chain-glaive keened deafeningly, as eager for blood as its master, and the flesh-tearer brought it down overhead in a deadly killing arc. Kharn made no attempt to dodge the blow or fake to the side, nor to bring his blade up to block the powerful strike. As the flesh-tearer screamed its horrifying war cry, he flipped the sword around into a reverse grip in his left hand. At the very last moment, he dropped down to one knee. The churning barbed teeth of the chain-glaive tore through the air only millimeters from his forehead as he slid under the blow. Before the flesh-tearer could turn for a second strike, Kharn rose and, still using his forward momentum, plunged his blade into the side of the flesh-tearer's head. With the flat of his right palm pressed against the pommel, he guided the sword as he rammed it home with the full weight of his body behind him. Kharn roared and twisted the hilt so sharply that the blade broke off inside his opponent's skull. The flesh-tearer was dead before his body hit the ground, a look of bewilderment in his lifeless eyes. Silence descended over the entire arena. It had all happened in the space of a few heartbeats, and Mavan was stunned at the shocking ease and violence with which the flesh-tearer had been dispatched. It was at once terrifying and exhilarating, and he let out a breath he did not know he had been holding as he realized that Brond had won. Taragara's retinue edged away from their master. The color had drained from his face, and his eyes were wide as he stared down at the corpse. Blood was soaking into the sand from the broken blade embedded in the flesh-tearer's skull. Taragara lifted his gaze, looking towards Brond, and the shock written on his face turned to livid anger. The crowd began to make itself known, their initial murmuring giving way to chanting and exultation at the sight of blood spilled in the name of Khorne. Brond stepped into the circle, a savage smile on his face as he moved to Kharn's side.
You should have taken the knee, Taragara. I might have given you a position of honor.
The World Eaters loyal to Taragara were tense, and even the chieftains were uneasy. Several, the avian Xenos and the gladiator among them, seemed eager to fight, but others, including the renegade guard commander, looked like they would rather be anywhere else at that precise moment. The Alpha Legionnaire appeared utterly unconcerned. The veins in Taragara's temples and neck bulged, and his pupils dilated sharply. His face reddened, and the corner of his mouth was flecked with white foam as he bared his teeth. Mavan recognized all of the signs and cursed under his breath.
Don't do this, Lord Taragara. Your champion lies dead. The host is Argus Brond by rights.
But he could see that Taragara was already too far gone. Even now his cerebral implants were overloading his system with pure, unadulterated rage. The butcher's nails were Angron's legacy within his shattered legion, corrupted by 10,000 years of unending warfare.
Kill them! Kill them both!
All of the assembled World Eaters, those loyal to Brond as well as those in Taragara's retinue, instantly had their weapons in hand, targeting each other with pistols and combi bolters. Chain axes growled and roared, and the crowd in the arena bayed for blood. Mavan's heart was beating hard in his chest, and his vision seemed to flicker red. His own system was urging him to kill, for even he, an aging servant, shared a portion of the World Eater's bloodlust. It would not have been the first time World Eater had slain World Eater, yet neither side appeared willing to be the first to initiate the bloodletting, in spite of Taragara's urging. Mavan knew that all it would take was one spark for the fire